What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Denley McIntosh, welcome to Living Corporate, man. How you doing?
I'm good, Zach, man. I'm glad we've been rapping and hitting and missing, but now it's
hey, man, it's a pleasure. Yeah, we met. We were talking off mic. We met at Be Future, part of Intuit's panel or section, and we met there. Your lovely wife. It's a pleasure to finally connect here. It's interesting. I remember. So when I was there, because Be Future was it was Ontario, right? Or was it? It was in Toronto.
Yeah. It was in Toronto. Well, it's funny. We would say it's Toronto, but technically it was just outside of Toronto because you were by the airport, by the conference center there. So it would be the near city, Mississauga, to be more accurate for those. But for those outside, it's still Toronto.
So we were there, and I remember I was having a conversation with somebody. And this obviously was before the presidential election in the United States. And I was talking to somebody who is Canadian. And I want to say they're in Toronto. I want to say they're from Toronto. And so I was talking about, racism, talking about the Black experience, talking about America. And she was kind of nodding along it's bad, it's crazy, wow, it's a lot going on, and wow, who's to say with this election, what's going on? And I was like, yeah, and then I said something like, yeah, I live in Houston. And the lady paused. She's like, huh? I thought you were from Canada. I said, nah. And she brought me in for a hug, like I told her I was terribly sick, right? And so it's curious because when you and I met and then just talking about your background, I think there's this assumption that Canada, I'll say for me, right? Lazy assumption I had, especially when I was probably in high school and early parts of college, that Canada doesn't really have the same types of problems that America does, and that the Black experience or even the Black and brown experience in Canada just is not really the same, or as it just isn't as concerning. As I look at your background, though, you do a lot of work in talent and culture. You do a lot of work, a lot of consulting work. You work in the public and private sector. You do a lot of work in the people space, helping organizations operate more fairly. Talk to me about your journey and also the need of that work, even in a place like Canada, even in Canada, a place that I believe many Americans would assume is just radically different.
It's where do we begin, man? It's we're not too dissimilar. We're not unlike at all. I mean, what many people don't know is that one, Canada did have slaves for a period, right? And then we had to abolish it. Now, granted, we were ahead in terms of the at the time we would call human rights. There was no term at that point, but we were going in that trajectory in terms of this abolishment that, from England and then carry over to Canada. In fact, after the Civil War in the U.S., we were sort of that bed to be able to help Black folks as they were moving up into the northern states. And even after, Civil War with Abraham Lincoln, there were still folks keeping on slaves, right? And so the Underground Railroad, of course, is a famous way of us escaping, and I say to use the broad stroke of us, into Canada, but all the way to the East Coast, as we say, Nova Scotia. And there's today there's an African Canadian towns, or one called Africville. And I say African Canadians because a lot of them have African American roots, right? So there is that connection there that many people don't appreciate. And also, if you look in the Midwest, when there was during the Reconstruction period and Jim Crow was, you have black folks that were going into the Midwest, right? Chicago, and then going to Illinois, going to Minnesota. But a lot of them went up into Alberta and Saskatchewan, to the prairies in Canada, because we were promising land as well. So you had folks who went up there, and some actually integrated with some of the indigenous folks that we call here. You call them Native Americans, and so you have some mixture there too. So yeah, our histories are interconnected. But I'll give you a little bit about my story, because it's still interconnect here in this conversation, because I think it's important when we talk about D&I. And I'm going to be very laser focused. I'm going to be more talking about the racial piece of it, because I think that's also some of the challenge, right? Because it became everything else, and then people lost perspective of why we're here in the first place. The civil rights in the U.S. and Canada, they dovetail, right? When Dr. King was building his team, there are people in Canada who who he consulted with, right? People don't know that in terms of even the March on Washington. Because when they were going through their struggles, we had our struggles in Canada as well. The distinction is that because we have a stronger tie to the United Kingdom, that makes all the difference. And that kind of brings me into a little bit of my story, because my family is of Jamaican ancestry, both my parents. And part of it, I always say that I have a relationship to one of the artists in the Wailers. If you don't remember the Wailers, or Bob Marley. One of the artists there who started the group, Peter Tosh. And so why is that relevant? Well, apart from the fact that I like to talk about Bob Marley and the Wailers, and people have this nostalgia and the things that Bob did in terms of the song. But that's the thing. What Bob was doing, and if you watch his biopic, the ability to bring people together through song, be able to speak truth to power through song. Peter Tosh, it was very much the same way. In his, I talked to his daughter, Yambi McIntosh, and I recommended, she lives actually in the Boston area, something to those who are interested in terms of the work of Peter Tosh. Why I bring him up, because one of the things I find very interesting is work in terms of the idea of justice, and his work spread broadly, not only in the Caribbean and Europe, but also in places like South Africa, where he was acknowledged posthumously for his work in terms of anti-apartheid and inclusion. So I have some of that sort of legacy in there. And I think about my name too, which is my middle name is Washington. My dad's name is Washington, middle name, and his first name is Norman Washington. He was named after Norman Washington Manley. The significance of that, because he's one of the leaders, one of the statesmen in Jamaica that helped brought Black Jamaicans, people that look like me, to be able to vote in Jamaica, because that wasn't always the case. And so Jack, there was always a legacy there. But what people don't know, that this legacy of slavery and discrimination actually was longer in the Caribbean than it was in the U.S. American slavery, and I'm not diminishing, by the way, because I'm going to say, oh, you're kind of having an oppression Olympics. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that in context, when sometimes we think of the Caribbean hot in the sun, and you think fun in places, and you think the U.S., oh man, all the struggles we have here. The Caribbean had its fair share of oppression and slavery and lynching and all those sort of things. So it was over 400 years. And Haiti was technically the first island that was liberated, right, from the French. In fact, actually, the liberation of Haiti had a carryover effect, because it actually caused the loss of colony for the French of New Orleans, right, and Louisiana. So Louisiana actually proper. So there is that connection there. But my parents specifically, they came to Canada in the 70s, just after really some of the changes in the law. We put in a multicultural act in Canada to say, it's the law of the land to bring diversity. That was first step of diversity. Really, the kind of the realization of civil rights. In the 1950s, Canada finally put some things in terms of accommodations and not discriminating by of race. So we were moving in that direction. People were trying to go to the U.S., unfortunately, like my family, but they weren't too inclined of getting people from the Caribbean, and the xenophobia was there at that point. England had its share, and so many folks can go to England from the West Indies or Jamaica, and so they end up in Canada, and a lot of them came here as nannies, looking after women who went to the workforce. And so my family, at least the women in the family, came up there, and then the men came to kind of work in the automotive, work in manufacturing, because that was a thing. We were behind the Americans in terms of production. So you had this wave of Caribbeans that came in the 70s. And I'm not a byproduct of that. All this to say that I've kind of multiculturalism and diversity is in many ways in Canada. I'm a kind of a byproduct of that. If there wasn't that happening, I wouldn't be here, maybe. But one of the things that really got to my consciousness and awareness as going through school, living in a high priority neighborhood, then moving to, at my time, we're thinking it was Bel Air. It was no close to Bel Air, but it was like Bel Air when we moved to the suburbs. Being the only black guy, being around in my early teens, and seeing the distinction between living in a high priority neighborhood like New York City, in Toronto, where you had the mixture. You had Hispanics, you had blacks, you had Asians and South Asians, and a great mixture of people around the world. Cosmopolitan, you had people from in the Middle East and East and West Africa. And then you move to a place that didn't look like you. Something spoke to me differently. Because when people ask me, did you go into this work because you wanted to bring all these people together? Yeah, that's true. But when I got into this work, because I didn't know any other reality, I was born into that. I was born to cosmopolitan. In fact, when I was actually being recruited, fast tracking here, I was actually being recruited to minister, actually be a youth leader at a mega church in California, Montevideo. And one of the things that the person who was recruiting me, a senior pastor there, and he said, I said, why are you looking in Canada to get a brother like me here? You have plenty of people who look like me down there. He said, no, I want you because in my area, too many of the experiences of us Hispanics and Asians and black we live in silos. And here we're in a space where we have to come together. We don't know how to do that. And we're looking for somebody who actually lives in the place that we want to cultivate. And I'm like, oh, really? So you're telling my lived experience living in a high priority neighborhood in a mixture of people from different walks of life is actually important for some work down you? Yeah, it is. Because we don't talk to each other. And so that was very informative to me. And then when I graduated from engineering, and I was looking to couple the engineering with some other layers, which is the theology that I kind of alluded to in terms of pastoral work. When I was becoming an engineer, I was part of the National Society of Black Engineers. We had a chapter in where I was in Toronto. And the fascinating thing that I learned in that, where it really started to galvanize this idea of the discrimination and injustice. I was one of the few black engineers in my program, all the fewer from the Caribbean. Okay. And when we were going to get funds from the school, we had a little issue, Houston, to use that term. We couldn't take off. And why was that? Because when we went to the school, they looked at the name over 20 years ago, and they said, National Society of Black Engineers. That's discrimination. What do you mean that's discrimination? That's the name of the town. Oh, no, you're discriminating. Who? Everybody else but who's not black. But the name had a historical legacy. Started at Purdue University, that place in the U.S., and, black people don't really get into STEM fields and STEAM field. Oh, no, you need to change the name. You got to be more inclusive. And so for the years I was there, those 4 years, we had a battle trying to get space, right? Where I had to now raise my voice in terms of I became a chapter vice president, chapter president, and we had no space, but we had the largest membership in Canada at the point, and I had to figure out a way to negotiate. The short of this is that when we went back to the school, and I'll save the school's name right at this point, even though they asked me for money, we said to the school, said, okay, what's your decision? And we said, you know what? You're right. We have no problem not taking your money, not taking a room. And so we didn't have a room, we didn't have any money, and we became still an unofficial chapter. I stood my ground there. And I remember that because my wife was, we were university sweethearts, and Tajay, and you met her, and we did this work together. We always would do this work together, and we inform our children, our 3 children that came to get into space. That kind of launched me into that space from the university, and then getting into seminary when I saw nobody in the room that looked like me, yet we're reaching to folks of faith who look like me. But people aren't teaching that. And so I had to learn in that sphere of, okay, now there's also a space not only outside the church walls, but inside the church walls where this conversation needs to happen. And so a lot of those experiences there from within the workplace, from school, in the workplace, all kind of culminating together where now I talk to clients, whether it be not-for-profits, whether it be the public sector, the private sector, all of that is where my D&I experiences come. But I want to just say last thing before we kind of have more of a conversation here, because when I go into D&I, I tell the people right off the bat, if you're hiring me because you're trying to do something to perform, to make yourself look good, or I'm the wrong person, because I want to know from you, do you see this as Maslow's hierarchy of need? Do you see this as number 5 on the sort of pinnacle of your own self-actualization as a person and as a leader? Because if you don't see that and you see this as a check mark, your thing is going to fail. But if you see this as part of you growing as a leader, to be able to welcome the stranger. By the way, the word hospital, if you didn't know that, the word hospital has the word hospice in it. The word hospice comes from the Greek. Hospice means the stranger. Right? And one of the gifts of, kind of going back to my church roots, one of the gifts that come from the Spirit is the gift of hospitality, which means welcoming the stranger. And so you got to be able to welcome the stranger in. All right. And that's one of the gifts. So I'll just kind of pause there because, I don't want to preach today, but that's another thing. But, I'm in the private sector. So when people ask me to coach, this is kind of what I do. And I got people to know that this is not performative. I want you to see this as your own form of growth.
First of all, thank you for sharing and your background and your story. What I love about what I'm hearing is that, again, like, you were born into a legacy, right? Like, based on like your father's experiences and what inspired him. But then on top of that, you had your own lived experiences. And then, to your point, like, you just continued that forward and just like really living out who you are, right? But you've been who you are since you got here. And so it's exciting, and it's really cool to hear how it's like, no, this is just organic for you. And I love the attitude of, hey, this is not performative. This is not meant to be a check the box exercise. This is really meant to be something of transformation. I think the other piece that's important in what you're mentioning, and this is like, I'm kind of going back because like living corporate, I've been around since 2018. But like one of the early conversations we had was with an executive, and we were talking about the concept of lifting as you climb. And I think lifting as you climb, it's not just about when you get a promotion, you get somebody else get a promotion. It's about making sure that you are opening the doors as wide as possible for other people to have space with you, right? And so this attitude of welcoming the stranger, this attitude of bringing people in, it's interesting because like I don't know if I've ever considered the direct spiritual implications of that, but yeah, like most assuredly, right? Like if you're thinking about like, from a religious context, irrespective of what tenets you may follow, this idea of like being kind and caring and loving your neighbor, or just treating other people, doing right by others, it can't just be, oh well, these people are good to talk at or use them to perform. No, it has to mean they actually have space at this table of power, that we're sharing authority, that they have their own voice to lead and drive. And maybe I need to sit down. Maybe I follow from them. Maybe I learn from them. Right. So, it's just a beautiful thing. Let's talk a little bit about some of the coaching work that you're doing. Right. So, You coach.
That's right.
You coach large and you coach enterprise and small organizations. You coach senior executives. In this landscape, right? And I say this landscape, I mean, and it's interesting because I don't know if I ever considered or imagined that there would be so much tension between Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
Especially when like we are so intertwined in so many things. I mean, you know, like it's just ridiculous to me. Like I literally would never imagine that. I'm curious, like, what are some of the major themes that you are experiencing in coaching executive leaders in Canada right now around diversity, equity, inclusion? Certainly, DEI, at least from where I'm sitting, is not under the same type of attack. It hasn't been turned into a slur in the same ways that it has in America. But I would imagine there's still different pressures. Like, talk to me about what you're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah, well, we are seeing a backlash similar to you, and but that's not really endemic to Canada or the U.S. It's globally, right? I will say to many of my contemporaries, we haven't really done a good job in bringing this sort of message in a way that seems to be not let's rob from Peter and give to Paul. I don't know if it's been articulated well. Granted, there are some people who will always say the sky is green, right? No matter how much evidence it is, or you know, there's so many outlandish things. But for those who are honest thinking people, I don't know if we've done a good job. At least the people I've spoken to, they would come to me this side. I had a professor, a white professor, that sat with me, and he said to me in confidence, he said, you know, there's something different about the way you delivered this. You challenged me, but you didn't. I still came back to you to hear some more, which is different, he said, because there's people who challenge me and also scare me, and I don't go back, right? And here's an elderly white gentleman that was an academic who said, but you challenged me. And I think that's when I share to my contemporaries, we haven't done a good job to make people be uncomfortable with the message, but not uncomfortable with the messenger. And I think we bring the two together, where now we have a backlash. So this is not just in the U.S. and Canada. We see this too. And there are some similar political views on that subject. So, but I think that's now not just us, but a global thing that's happening. And so I do think that one of the things I have to dismiss is some of the fact that, listen, I don't know what you heard. You may have heard something from so-and-so, your Uncle Jay, Uncle Roy, whoever talk about this. But let me just, from me, this is what inclusion diversity is all about. And I have to baseline it because I know a lot of people got it wrong. The other piece is that a lot of my contemporaries, I would say, didn't know how to talk D&I in business language. And what I mean by that, people understand it from, yes, high level, inspirational, we ought to do it. But what does it mean in the day-to-day operational? What should I be looking at in terms of my strategy? What should I be looking at in terms of my policy? What should I be looking at my governance? What should I look at my processes? What should I look at my practices? What does that all mean on the ground? I don't know. You just need to do it. That doesn't help people who don't really wrap their mind around it on a day-to-day and frankly don't care, because at the end of the day, they're trying to earn a living, a profit. So I do think the difference when I came into the table, when we were doing it, my wife and I, was to say, okay, we're going to show you how this works at all levels of the organization, from the C-suite to your board, right down to the person who licks the envelope. I don't think people lick the envelope. But put it in the box.
And I think, like, to your point, I think that, first of all, effective consulting against anything, if it's not connecting back to like the practical bottom line, that it's probably not really good.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about, like, especially in times of recession, where there's more and more pressure to explicitly show or connect things back to return and value and like monetary value and not theoretical value, and like culture enrichment and team, all those things are really important. And it's interesting that every time we get into places where we have recessionary fears, those are things that first get cut. However, that is the
Yeah, yeah.
reality of just how a lot of poor business people do business, is that effective consulting connects back whatever you're doing to some sort of operational lever. And if you're not really connected back to some type of operational lever, then yeah, you're not really going to listen. I think when you combine that with like the complexity of D&I, and where it's easy to get into finger wagging and name calling, and then, you know, people get sensitive, you step on landmines, whatever the case is, it makes it even more complex. So kudos to you. In fact, like, to that end, like, let's talk a little bit about your own firm, Renew IQ. Like, why the name, why your own firm, like why your own business. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. So my wife and I, Tajay McIntosh, and heck of a entrepreneur in her own right, and she comes from the side of process and change management and strategy, married with my sort of cultural intelligence, CQ, and being able to work the leaders from both sides, right? Because sometimes, as you talk about, you sit down and have a conversation with leaders. Okay, you give me a lot of great stuff that I learned in my liberal arts course, all right? But what does that mean for my bottom line? And Tajay compliments me. Not to say I don't know, but this is our sort of our shticks. And so Renew IQ was speaking to the fact of renewing your mind, for some of those who may understand what that means. And it means to change the way you think. All right. How do we change the way you think on a matter? And it doesn't have to be on simply D&I, but anything about life where we said life works like this. Oh, it don't work like that. Ooh, it's a little uncomfortable, but we're going to help you change your mind and help you through that uncomfortable process of getting to what reality is really looking like in front of you. So that's what we do. That's the reason we always found as people, when we had these conversations, people leave there going, and so a lot of those aha moments and say, okay, we're kind of renewing, we're changing people's the way they think. So Renew IQ's consulting is that, which spun off into my podcasting, and which is where I kind of say that, how do I make the complex simple, the simple meaningful, and the meaningful profound, right? How do I change your mindset around that? And the podcast is all about making those really thorny and nebulous or abstract conversation that people may be having or thinking, but how do I ground them into the day-to-day reality? And so the Coach's Corner with Denley McIntosh was a spun-off of the Renew IQ, both in the sense of with that mission of changing people's minds, and not only changing people's minds, changing people's hearts, which change people's hands, the way that they serve and engage with people.
You know, it's that's really cool. And I think there's something to be said about understanding where your passion is and building your own avenue to fulfill it. I think, you know, there's all sorts of options there. I mean, obviously, while Renew IQ is happening, y'all also have y'all's own, you know, ventures, and maybe even like, you know, 9 to 5 from time to time. But I think it's always important to have your own niche that you're working and building on, that you can really hone your passions and talents. I think for me, as I think about my own career, I wish I would have started living corporate earlier. And I started it when I was 28, but I wish I would have started when I was like 25, because there's just so much time I spent looking to like live out my passions or my dreams or my, like giving the best of myself to these other spaces where it's like, man, you could have invested that other place. So shout out to you, because I know Renew IQ has been going on since like 2002, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, actually, when we came out of school, we started the business together because we were really ambitious. Said we're going to take over the world, and reality hits that. I mean, who's going to hire someone who technically doesn't have experience? They think they know it all, number one. And then you have a couple of children here or there. You have to be able to balance that. And obviously, a hope and a dream doesn't fill the baby's belly,
100%, man.
Right?
These kids got to eat real food,
so
man.
You got to eat. So I got 3, and so I had to take it slow. So I was bivocational in many ways, kind of doing one and then the other. And I mean, I say to people who struggle in terms of entrepreneurship in sense of, do I choose one or the other? Everyone wants to look at their life situation. I think now specifically for us as Black folks, to me, it's not more so much one or the other. It's I do think what I find, at least in Canada, the struggle for Black entrepreneurs compared to the U.S., we don't have the critical mass. You know, you have over 40 million Black folks, even though relative to percentage is maybe 14%. We have like say 2% of the population in Canada, but that's 2%. That's less than a million, right? We only have about 40 million. And so if we're trying to say feed our own, you know, we'll support our own, we just don't have enough people. And so the distinction here may I find maybe in Canada, maybe the US in terms of Black people going into entrepreneur, they don't have the network, one, that can support them. Because there's not enough of us to do that, right? Tyler Perry, when he came out with his stuff, say, hey, support me, right? Don't bamboozle or my stuff. No, don't pirate my stuff. Just come and support me. And people did, right? We can't do the same here. We have to piggyback off the U.S., right? Well, you know, Drake. So he understood, right? He piggybacked in the U.S. and then he gets everyone in Canada. So that's how it rolls here for us. That's a distinction here. The other piece that I find interesting, and this is not applying to any entrepreneur, especially those who are minorities. What I find here is that there's a couple of things. When you're starting as an entrepreneur, if you don't have corporate experience, and your idea is to move your startup to something that is more of a medium-sized business, you do need some experience from corporate. So you need to pull something there. So if you don't have that, make sure you find someone who does, because this is what I find with a lot of not-for-profits. They have a lot of great ideas, but they have no structure because many of them have never been in the depths of corporate to bring that governance and that structure there. So I think there's importance there. That at least I learned being in the public sector and government's all about governance. The other piece I would want to say to you, that the people who control the purse strings are the people that you need to know that you're one or two relationships. If you're 4 relationships to those people, it's going to be hard, bro. It's going to be hard, because those are people who, anytime you talk to someone and says, oh, I got to talk to so-and-so, it's over, because those people don't trust their people telling them what to do with their money. But if you were to hold in the purse string and I'm talking to you, you'll feel more confident. Say, yeah, I'm going with Denley. Your people say, wait a minute, what do you mean? You haven't talked to us. It's my money, right? The closer you are to the power that controls the purse strings, the better you are in terms of seeing your business being funded. Because if you're far from that, you're going to find yourself starting a business and then going back to a job, because you just don't have the social capital to sustain.
Look, Denley, I mean, look, 100% spot on. And as your perspective resonates true with me, I think about with living corporate. If it wasn't for my consulting, my work as a consultant, my work in tech, then like I wouldn't have the same, like just the entire structure. This one existed in the way it does. So, and then absolutely spot on. When it comes just to relationship building, I think that's true. That's certainly true for entrepreneurs in America, that you need to be connected to the person who controls the purse, and or at least have a relationship with the person who has a relationship with the purse, right? Like you want to have like maybe be half a degree away or maybe 1 degree away, but like you need to be relatively close. You know, you need to identify and build a relationship with those influencers. Without that, and I agreed, without the some of the corporate context that you get from working for somebody, it's harder. It's just hard.
That's right. And I think if people like push back and say, I don't agree with your sentiment, and you're just saying this because of, you know, color of skin and that. Listen, sir. Those who start the biggest tech companies, how many of them are dropouts? Many of them are hard dropouts. Ask us, who look like us, how many of us have dropped out? And
correct. It's extremely rare.
You know this, and the thing is, so what sustains those folks who drop out? Because they got family. They have family and friends. I mean, when you talk to people, like it's so like to your point, man. Like when I talk to other, not even talk to other entrepreneurs, just when I was a consultant, and I would talk to people, and they would be like, yeah you know. Like, you know, my family, I'm thinking about doing a business, doing like a family and friends round. We do like $100,000 raise. Yeah. I'm like, $100,000 raise, just like with your friends and your family. Like, yeah, my uncle will put in 30, my dad put in 75. Like, what? And so
I agree, right? This is not like, again, I think we're both pro entrepreneur. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying it's just exponentially easier.
That's right.
With those relationships. And every black entrepreneur that I know, they have really deep relationships. And a lot of them have really strong corporate backing in terms of like they had some type of experience working somewhere with some type of brand, and they leverage that brand once they leave to help build out new relationships, right? And last thing is they still keep they at least keep relatively positive relationships with some people at those brands that helps them continue their own business. Like that's just the way it goes.
That's right.
But look, Dylan, I feel like we could talk all day. We probably need to have you back for a part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Before we let you go, where can people learn more about you, your work? Where can they engage you? Like, let's get that.
Yeah. The 411 me. I'm not hard to find. I think that if you do a Google search, I'm popping up more places. But I do like to pop up in more places, like in the neck of the woods that people, where the folks that roll with you. So one, you can find me on www.renewiq.ca. Yes, .ca, not .com. So we're Canadian over here. So renewiq.ca. That's one place. But also the Coach's Corner. All right, the Coach's Corner with Denley McIntosh. So I'm found on all major platforms in terms of podcasts, Apple and Spotify. So the Coach's Corner with Denley McIntosh, because someone has took the Coach's Corner before. So make sure you put Denley McIntosh with it. That's the best Coach's Corner out there. If you want to drop a line, an email to reach out for some kind of one-on-one consulting, hello@renewiq.ca. That's HELLO@RENEWIQ.ca. Hello, not Jello. Hello at renewiq.ca. So those are some of the key ways folks can find me. And of course, love to connect with people on the other social media platform. I roll mainly on LinkedIn, but you can try IG, Threads. There are days I'll connect that, but LinkedIn is part of my preferred platform there.
Denley, it's been a pleasure. We look forward to having you back soon. Again, that's Denley McIntosh, entrepreneur, speaker, executive, consultant, all around dope dude. I look forward to having you and talking to you soon, man.
I appreciate it, man. If folks want me to speak for them, then I'm happy to bring the noise wherever it's found. So thank you for creating a space for me to have this conversation, and looking forward to connect with you sometime again soon. All right, peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.